I'm so very excited today to share with you the stories of some of the saints depicted in the stained glass windows right here at St. Anne's. As I mentioned last time, the beauty of these windows helps to raise our minds and our hearts to God. They reveal to us the beauty of God, not just in the fact that these stained glass windows are masterpieces of art in their own right, but in the very fact that in the subjects they depict, these holy men and women of our faith tradition, they show to us how God has reached out in their lives to bring them to a place of holiness, and how God continues and wants to reach out to us in our lives to make us holy as well. So today, as we continue our tour of the church, we want to talk about the stories of two great saints from our tradition, Saint Therese of Lisieux and Saint Francis of Assisi. This window of Saint Therese really impresses me, not just because she's a wonderful saint for our times, but because our community here at St. Anne's chose to honor her with a window so shortly after her canonization as a saint. Therese was born in 1873 in the town of Alençon, France, but died at the age of 24 in 1897. She was then canonized in 1925. Our Church of St. Anne's was built in the 1930s, so our community recognized her holiness right away and wanted to honor her legacy of faith. But what was it about Therese that made her a saint? Let's find out. Like I mentioned, Therese was born in a small town in France. Her given name was Marie Françoise Therese Martin. Her father was a watchmaker and jeweler, and her mother was a lace maker. She was one of 9 children, but 4 of her siblings died very young, leaving 5 girls for her parents to raise. This was made all the more difficult when her mother died when Therese was only 4 years old. Her dad ended up being very protective of his daughters and would do anything to make them happy. Now, Therese, as a little girl, didn't always act like you think a saint might act. In fact, as a girl, she was very sensitive and was prone to temper tantrums if she didn't get her way. As a girl, Therese was very sickly, but she experienced a miraculous healing through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary when she was 11 years old. But that wasn't the experience that bolstered her faith. That was a couple years later when she had a profound conversion experience on Christmas Eve when she was 13. And so from that moment on, she vowed to love Jesus Christ with all of her heart, and all she wanted was to enter into religious life and become a nun. In doing so, she would follow in the footsteps of her sisters, all of whom entered the convent. But as she pursued this, even at the age of 13, she was told by religious superiors that she was too young. She would have to wait until she was 16. But not willing to give up, she appealed to her bishop, who again denied her request. So she decided to appeal directly to the Pope, who allowed Therese to enter the convent at the age of 15. And there she took the name Sister Therese of the Child Jesus and the Holy Face. Therese wanted to do great things. She wanted to change the world, perhaps by becoming a missionary. But she struggled to figure out exactly how to do that. After a lot of prayer and a lot of discernment, she finally came to her greatest realization, what she's perhaps most known for, that in her words, "My vocation is love." And around this, she developed a simple yet very powerful spirituality based on a childlike trust and confidence in God. Her life was centered around doing simple things with extraordinary love, which she believed would change the world. It was this simple life that she lived with great humility and love that converted so many hearts. We all would like to do great things in this world, but think that these things have to be some grand gesture. But Therese teaches us that all we have to do is love God and love others. And that transforms even something as simple as holding a door open for someone into an act of extraordinary value. Therese died at the age of 24, but not before writing down reflections about her life, which now are compiled into a book called Story of a Soul, her autobiography. She became a saint of the church in 1925, but before she died, she expressed a desire to spend her eternity doing good things on earth. In fact, she mentioned wanting to shower roses upon the earth. and that she does. A well-known novena to Therese promises that as a sign that your petition has been heard by God, you will receive a rose from Therese herself. Because of this, she earned the nickname the Little Flower, which you'll see as part of her name at the bottom of her stained glass window here at St. Anne's. And wherever you go, whenever you see an image of Therese, you'll always know it's her because she's holding a bouquet of roses. St. Francis of Assisi is perhaps best known to us as the saint that loved animals. He's often depicted with birds and other small woodland creatures at his feet. But his life is so much more than simply animals and nature. Francis was born in the year 1181 in Italy. His father was a businessman who was often away on business trips to France. In fact, he was away when his son was born. His mother had him baptized right away with the name Giovanni, in honor of John the Baptist. But his father, when he returned, was upset about that, and he renamed him Francesco, Francis, in honor of France. His father was wealthy, so Francis grew up in relative ease. But people liked Francis nonetheless. He was always happy, always charming, a born leader. He developed skills and an interest for business, which made his father very happy. But Francis loved something even more than business. He loved glory, nobility, prestige, and he wanted to gain those by becoming a knight. So when war broke out with some nearby enemies, Francis jumped at the chance to fight. And after losing most of his comrades, Francis was captured and chained in a dungeon for a year, at which time his family paid a ransom and he returned to his former life. But that experience didn't stop Francis from wanting to be a knight. He got his next chance when the call for knights came out for the Fourth Crusade. But he had barely left his hometown when he had a dream in which God told him to return home. So he went back, but got laughed at and called a coward for abandoning the crusade. And his father became very angry at him for wasting money on knight's armor. So Francis dedicated himself to prayer. He would often go out into the countryside and reflect and meditate. And one day, while out riding his horse, he met a leper on the path. Francis was repelled by his appearance and the smell, but nevertheless dismounted his horse, approached the leper, and kissed his hand. The leper kissed Francis's hand in return. And as Francis rode off, he turned around to take one last look at the leper, but he had disappeared. Francis saw it as a test from God, one which he had passed. Francis's most significant experience came when he visited the church of San Damiano in his hometown of Assisi. As he was praying before the crucifix, he heard the voice of Christ speak to him from the cross, saying, "Francis, rebuild my church." He thought it meant to repair the physical building as it was in disrepair. So he began using his family's wealth to rebuild. His father didn't like that he was being so irresponsible and wasting money in such a way, so he disowned Francis. Francis in turn renounced his inheritance and went off into the woods to live a simple life. And there he realized that what Jesus was calling him to do was not to rebuild a physical church, but to help rebuild the church spiritually. It had been struggling with many false teachings and scandals in recent years. So Francis began to preach the gospel, even though he wasn't a priest. He decided to simply share the good news and focused on the themes of returning to God and obeying the church. Others who listened to him became attracted to his message and wanted to follow him as a disciple. And so as more and more people came to follow him, Francis felt the need to develop a rule for life, which later became the foundational rule for life for the Franciscan order of priests today. It was based on the scripture passage of Jesus telling the rich young man, "Go and sell all that you have, give to the poor, and take up your cross daily." As his community grew, Francis sent out preachers in teams of 2 to preach the gospel message. Francis's life is a testament to the fact that we can have very little but still be filled with great joy and great purpose in life. While he owned nothing, he always had enough. His life was about simplicity, trusting God, and remaining faithful to spreading the message of God's love. As I mentioned earlier, we often see images of St. Francis with animals. Interesting that our stained glass window doesn't include that aspect of his ministry. Instead, we see him with the cross and the Bible and a rosary, all the fundamental weapons used in the Catholic's life to stay close to Christ. That doesn't mean, however, that Francis's love of nature and animals was not a big part of his life and spirituality. In fact, Francis saw himself connected to the animals just as much as to other human beings. One famous story tells of Francis preaching to hundreds of birds about the importance of being thankful to God for providing for them and allowing them the freedom to fly wherever they wished. The story goes that the birds stayed perched at their places and listened to Francis, only flying off when he said they could leave. One of the things that we'll learn as we learn about these saints is that time and time again, God plants a desire into our hearts. And when we respond to that call with genuine trust and genuine love, he does great things in their lives. I invite you to really enter into prayer and ask God, Lord, what do you want me to do with my life? How can you use me to make a difference in this world? And then be willing to say yes to that call when you hear it. God will do extraordinary things in your life. Until next time, when we explore once again some of the saints depicted in our windows here at St. Anne's, God bless.